Hello, BookTube. We have a storm bearing down on Boston from the upper Midwest. It's currently battering the Twin Cities, but it is headed this way. Uh, I have looked at all the data. We are now on the doorstep of the thing, and I really don't think it's going to be misplaced. I think this storm is actually going to hit Boston. I'm not joining the alarmism about the predictions. I don't think. I think the predictions, most of the ones that I've seen, are clearly just clickbait. A terrible commentary on the state of our society that even meteorologists feel like they need to lie for clickbait. But there's nevertheless going to be snow and sleet tonight. It's not going to happen until well after nightfall. But nevertheless, a storm is in the offing, and that automatically makes me think about building a little nest inside a wooden box, and the little nest is made of books. Maybe it makes you think the same thing. So I grabbed a bunch of books, used books, that are going to be part of my nest. Maybe if it snows overnight. I mean, the overnight reading will mostly be new releases, but at some point, during the night, when my little bean is sound asleep, when the whole world is sound asleep, not that this neighborhood isn't sound asleep anyway. This neighborhood has gone very quiet. I think a lot of people have moved out. I have no idea why. I wonder what they know that I don't know. But late at night, when the whole world is quiet, I am sure I am going to start to hear that particular telltale soft hissing at the windows that means snow. I'll reach over, I'll pull the curtain back, and I will see, in fact, that it is snowing. So these books will feel nice and warm and snuggly, and I don't know how many of them will be of interest to you. I don't know that we've ever talked about any of these on this channel. Baby, what are you doing, baby girl? So I thought I'd show you. It's all just a pretext. The storm, the nesting material, it's all just a pretext to talk to you about books. All I want is all the pretexts in the world to talk to you about books. So the first one is a paperback, a little mass market paperback from the 1940s. This is a murder mystery. We're only, 3 weeks away from March Mystery Madness, the 10th anniversary of March Mystery Madness. This is by a mystery author I have never read. The mystery author is Anna Mary Wells. And in the 1940s, she wrote Murderer's Choice. In one of these really sturdy paperbacks that this will certainly survive a read. It's not a cheaply made mass market at all. And it has what the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston has informed me is called a map back. So you are not getting a description of the book or any blurbs on the back. Instead, you're getting a diagram of where the action takes place. This is a map back. Whether it's a country house or an apartment in the city or whatnot, it was once upon a time very popular to do. And this stars a private detective who is a woman, which is pretty interesting. And the storyline is gold. I can imagine that Mary Wells probably did a little jig when the storyline came to her. There's two brothers, Frank Osgood and Charles Osgood. Charles Osgood is the older, and he has been bullying Frank Osgood for Frank's entire life. They're adult men now, but it doesn't matter. As some of you will know from personal family dynamics, those hooks go deep. That older brother is always going to be able to torment the younger brother, almost always. And Frank Osgood knows it. He can't stand his older brother. But the older brother has complete control. The older brother is a murder mystery writer. and he has complete control over the family. And it reaches a point where Charles Osgood tells Frank Osgood that not only does he hate him, but that he intends to commit suicide and leave just enough clues to implicate Frank in the murder. And it's not an empty threat, because Charles Osgood has made his career writing murder mysteries. So Frank Osgood knows that if anybody can do that, he can. And of course, there's no record of the conversation. And then, sure enough, Charles Osgood does end up dead, but the coroner returns a verdict of natural causes, not suicide. Which not only raises the question about all sorts of family inheritances, well, what's going on here, but also, could that be wrong? Could it be wrong? I'm going to have a ball reading this. Absolutely. I don't know what to expect. I've never read this author before, but any old paperback with a map back is fine by me. Then we have something from, I think this was last year. This was translated fiction from 2023. It was translated from the Japanese. The author is Michiko Aoyama, and it is What You Are Looking For is in the Library. Cute little hardcover. You can't tell, but her name and the title are heavily embossed, deeply embossed. And this is about a quirky little library in Tokyo. Random people show up there and random various crises in their life, and the quirky little librarian is able to recommend them just the right book to open the clouds and have the sunlight peer down to solve their problems. This will not be what I have referred to for the last 10 years as Japanese zombie fiction. I don't think it will be. I haven't read it. It was all the rage a couple of years ago, and I didn't read it. It was very much a Jack Edwards book, and I tend not to read them. There's literally no meat on the bone, so I tend not to read them. But from the descriptions that I've read, I don't think this will be Japanese zombie fiction. Japanese zombie fiction being fiction that is completely drab. The writing is completely monotone, and the characters are also completely monotone. They've all been freshly lobotomized, so they don't care about anything. They say whatever, or I don't know, while you're killing them, or while they're being killed. It's all affectless, and then it just ends. I don't understand this. I've long since passed. At first, of course, when I was countering book after book like that, I was thinking this has got to be a failure on the part of the translators. But no, I've read probably 70 examples of that in the last 10 years. That cannot be just the fault of translators. That has to be something going on. I don't know if this will be Japanese zombie fiction. It will depend on the various characters who go to the library. Maybe they're all zombies. But it could be something just as bad. Something that's come up and started coming from from Japan in like the last 6 or 7 years, which is Japanese twee fiction, where there's a twee little thing that is just going to feel so good. It's just going to feel so good. Like there's a little park, and when you sit on a bench in the park just swimming in your own problems, a cat wanders up to you. And it's a different cat for every person, but the cat always it does just the right thing to make you feel just great. Or Tokyo at night. We've got all these quirky characters, but none of them are strung out on meth. None of them have a knife. No, they're all just quirky, and when the sun comes up, everybody's going to be in the right seat, and they're all going to be in love with each other. This could be that. And even if it isn't that, just going by the title alone, this taps into a kind of writing and also thinking about books that I absolutely hate. The books are ethereal magic way of looking at. I absolutely hate that. And you know why I hate that? The why I hate you don't know, you don't care, but you're trapped in this video anyway. The reason that I hate that is ironic. It's because books actually are magic, but not that kind of magic. Not a dumb one size fits all and I'm the magician and you're the recipient type of magic. Not that at all. Every one of you listening to me knows perfectly well that books are indeed magic. I have had that magic work in my life for a long time, since I became a reader. And all of you have felt it at one time or another. I think the hunt for that magic keeps us reading. Through all the dumb shows where you can see the ventriloquist's lips moving, you are going looking for that magic. That magic is real. But I'm going to wander to the library. I'm not a reader. I have no idea what books are. The librarian doesn't know me. But books can only be done in one way. It's a kind of religion, and I'm the priestess, and I'm going to pick the right book for you. You can't read something else, and you can't get what you're looking for out of something I don't pick for you. No, there's just the right book for you, and just the right way to read it. That drives me crazy, and I've encountered that so many times. And no, I'm not blaming the Japanese here, because what was the most famous example from like 15 years ago? Was it Mr. Penumbra? Or the bookshop on the left bank, or there are endless numbers of these things. There always has been. Even Christopher Morley wrote one 150 years ago. There's always been a temptation to go into this kind of schmaltz in the hopes of hooking readers, but it doesn't hook readers. It hooks people who wish they were readers. It hooks the Jack Edwards of the world. It hooks people who like the aesthetic. They like the TikTok of reading. They don't hunker down and get into the weeds. They're certainly not going to. It hooks people who love the idea of reading, but they don't actually do it. They scroll on their phones instead. They don't actually do it. I see these people, or rather, I overhear them every week. I go to a used bookstore here in Boston called the Brattle Bookshop, which has a sale lot outdoors. Huge sale lot outdoors. I spend most of my time in the sale lot, not only because the prices are cheaper, but also because it helps me avoid the staff. And when I'm out there, I hear passersby make comments, and I've heard them make these comments for, well, I've been a customer at the Brattle for over 50 years, for over half a century, and I've heard customers say these kinds of things all that time, where they're passing by in a group like Brown's Cows on the sidewalk, and they see all these books with people browsing them, and one person will guaranteed say, "Ah, I love reading," as they walk on. You tell me, BookTube. We're all different people from different countries, different time zones, different walks of life. You tell me. A person who genuinely loves reading is walking along the sidewalk and encounters a building-sized lot full of books with a price tag of $3. Does that person keep on walking? Does that person heave a sigh from remembering their teenage days when their waist was thin and their hair was thick and say, "Ah, I love reading," and keep moving? No. A person who loves reading does not do that. Instead, that sigh is heaved by the kind of person who loves the idea of reading. And that, I think, is what this is aimed for. That libraries are a magical place. And again, just like with reading, so too with libraries, I want to say the reason I hate this kind of twee writing, if that's what it ends up being, is because libraries actually are magical places. But not this kind of magic. You make your own magic. And it's through trial and error. Lots of errors, lots of frustration. We will see. Probably some of you have read this. So maybe you can tell me if I'm barking up the wrong tree. I'm going to read it anyway, because it's going to snow. Then we have a lightweight thing. This is one of those very lightweight hardcovers from when paper was being rationed. This is from 1953. Leslie Charteris. This is Senior Saint. And it's you can't tell in this video, but it's an incredibly lightweight thing. Somebody put a dust jacket protector on there. And it is one of the innumerable Saint novels that Charteris wrote about Simon Templar, a guy named Simon Templar, who is kind of a Robin Hood figure, kind of just a general thief figure, kind of a genteel vigilante figure. He's not a typical private detective. He's certainly not a policeman. But he is a good guy. And Charteris struck a nerve, and people liked Saint novels, so he churned them out like butter. 1 million of them. This is not a Saint novel. This is a collection of Saint stories, all of which are taking place south of the border. And we get, I think, if I remember correctly, this is one of the many Saint novels that actually opens with a big orotund description of the character. So that you know, before the idea becomes too firmly established that Simon Templar, or as it usually seems easier to call him, the Saint, never bothered to steal anything of which the value could be expressed in less than 6 figures, I want to tell here the story of the most trivial robbery he ever committed. The popular conception of the meanest theft that can be committed is epitomized in the cliche of stealing pennies from a blind man. Yet that, almost literally, is what the Saint once did. And he is perhaps prouder of it than any other larceny in a list which long ago assumed the dimensions of an epic. The Saint has been called by quite a thesaurus of romantic names, of which the Robin Hood of modern crime and the 20th century's brightest buccaneer are probably the hardest worked. The public officials obligated to restrain his self-appointed and self-administered kind of justice, and by malefactors upon whom it has been exercised, he has been described as even more definite glossary of terms which cannot be quoted in publication available to the general public. What's the matter, baby? What you doing? I'm reading. You want to go over there? You're going to have to make an epic jump. There's a bit of a gap. I think you can do it. See if you can do it. Go on. There you go. You did it. Now you're over there. Here, please allow me to continue now that my pint-sized little interruption. What she's going to make of the snow, I have no idea. To himself, he was only an adventurer born in the wrong age, a cavalier cheated out of his sword, a pirate robbed of his black flag, with a few inconvenient ideals which had changed over the years in detail, but never in principle. By whatever adjectives you choose to delineate him, and with whatever care you make of his motives, the sober arithmetical record certainly makes him, statistically, one of the greatest robbers of all time. You see what I mean? That kind of drums and timpani thing that Charteris, once he realized he had a hit on his hands, he unleashed that. And that makes the Saints novels actually really enjoyable. They're really enjoyable flyweight stuff, not just literally, but I would love... I mean, all the Saint books came out like this in these cute little hardcovers. And I would love them all like that. Unfortunately, you're most likely to find the Saint books in really cheap mass market paperbacks. And because they're cheap mass market paperbacks from 70 years ago, they are not going to hold up. Unlike Murderer's Choice. This will hold up. But a Saint book will not. Most of them will not. So I have tended not to get them. I've tended just not to bother. Unless I find old period pieces like this. Let's see here. What's next here? We're just going to go through a bunch of used books because it's going to snow. Because it's going to snow tonight. I'm looking out at the world and I'm seeing the very lightest covering of remnant snow. We've had a few thin dustings, less than an inch. And it's been so cold that it hasn't gone anywhere. So I'm looking out and I'm seeing little pockets of snow here and there. And that view is going to be radically different this time tomorrow. Things are going to be buried in snow. Caps on fence tops, blurred outlines of house tops. I think, unless the storm takes a weird turn. Now, it could take two turns, right? It could take one of two turns. Either it could turn south, just a little, which I think the next big storm, the one in the middle of this coming week, is going to do. I think that's going to turn south more than it does north. If this storm turns a little south, then Boston will get 2 or 3 inches. But if it turns even a little north, we could get 10 inches. Which would be remarkable. This part of the world does not get that kind of weather anymore. But we'll see. But anyway, the next 2 books here are on the same subject. They are on the subject of James Boswell and Dr. Samuel Johnson. Any of you who've watched my channel for a long time will know that Boswell's Life of Johnson is one of my favorite books of all time. And also Dr. Johnson's writings I absolutely love. And his life I absolutely love. I have half a shelf of biographies of Johnson. But Boswell is also fascinating. He's known now, he's infamous now, and synonymous now with Johnson's name. And ironically enough, in a twist of fate that only one contemporary of Boswell's actually saw or predicted, Johnson is now mostly remembered from Boswell's Life of Johnson, which at the time no one would have thought that was even remotely possible, but now it's true. So they are joined forever. They are co-joined forever in history, which is a little unfair because that throws Johnson's own literary output into the shade, and it shouldn't be because it's magnificent. But nevertheless, I tend to read about them together, and I admit I find Boswell fascinating in a kind of weird way. I find him fascinating. So I found a copy on the shelves here. I found a copy of Adam Sisman. Adam Sisman wrote a book called Boswell's Presumptuous Task, which is all about the writing of the Life of Johnson, the assembling of the material, the first idea of writing. Of course, as Johnson got older and became more of an institution, as he became more and more infirm, and had more and more scenes in public, a number of people associated with him, friends, acquaintances, literary rivals, thought, sad as it is to say, pretty soon there's going to be a booming market for Johnson books. They all wanted to write the book. They all did. And Boswell did too. He recognized an opportunity when he saw it, the biggest opportunity of them all. Boswell was wrong about a lot. He could be a ninny. But he understood that his connection with Johnson was his ticket to immortality. And he had an idea for a book, and it wasn't like any of the other books that were coming out or were destined to come out. It was monstrously bigger and weirder. And I believe, I have always maintained, an incredible expression of literary genius. That in the 21st century, certainly it doesn't get, nobody reads in the 21st century, but even in the late 20th century, it didn't get the credit that it deserved as a literary mark. Instead, it always gets credit as a biography. the first of biographies, and there is no second. And that has caused people to overlook the literary achievement. And Sisman doesn't deal with that. He doesn't deal with that much at all. The last part of this book does. I found a UK hardcover. H, is that Hamish Hamilton? Yeah. I found a UK hardcover. The US hardcover did not look like this. The US paperback, Once Upon a Time for Boswell's Presumptuous Task, was everywhere. Couldn't go into a used bookstore without seeing it. Haven't seen it in a while, but I like this better anyway. And Sisman wrote a terrific book. This thing actually took off. Writing about the life of Johnson in all of its stages, the amorphous stage before it was even really a glimmer in its author's eye, to the research stage, the friendship, to the writing, and then finally to the publication, and all of the gamut of reactions that it got. Some of Boswell's friends were blown away by the life of Johnson. A couple of them were blown away and wrote Boswell long, glowing testimonials in private. They weren't currying favor. They wrote long, glowing testimonials to him saying, this was so much fun. The enjoyment, entertainment, and fun, those words come up over and over again. And you show somebody Boswell's Life of Johnson today, a gigantic brick of a thing in the Oxford World Classics series, the last thing in the world anybody's going to see or think when they see that book is fun. And yet it is fun. It's tremendous. It's so strange, but it is fun. And a couple of those people who wrote those testimonials to Boswell are raked over the coals in the life of Johnson themselves. They didn't care. They didn't care. But Sisman also covers all the other reactions to Boswell's life of Johnson, including some of Boswell's own claims that were just wrong, because Boswell was a liar and a lech and a lunatic and a whole bunch of other things. He claimed, for instance, that his book was outselling the other huge seller of the moment, Edmund Burke's book on the French Revolution. And it was not. It was not, by any stretch of the imagination, doing that. But also, he wanted this book to succeed as a main chance, as a commercial enterprise. So, for instance, Burke made mention to him of the fact that the king was reading Boswell's Life of Johnson and tremendously enjoying it. Well, naturally, Boswell thought that would be a hell of a blurb. He didn't use that word, but that would be a hell of a thing for people to know. And asked Burke to put it in writing, and Burke wouldn't. I think I haven't read this since it first came out. When was that? 2000. The year 2000. So 25 years ago. But if I remember correctly, Sisman puts it really well that Burke really enjoyed the book, but he did not trust the author, so he refused to do it. In fact, he criticized Boswell and said, that's really kind of beneath you to ask. It's not a gentlemanly thing to ask. And there were other reactions like that. People wondering, the impression that you get in that section of the book, which does a real service to the reader, because those reactions are scattered all over the place otherwise. Here you find them all neatly and artfully pulled together. The impression you get is that a lot of people reading Boswell's Life of Johnson loved it, thought it was really entertaining, but were unsettled by how naked it is, by how raw it is, and also how strange it is. It doesn't start with Johnson's grandparents or anything like that. It's a strange, prismatic book. And if you've ever read it, will know that. Unfortunately, most people have no longer read it. It's no longer considered a must-read. But a lot of people in Boswell's own day found that disturbing, because maybe some of them didn't know him well enough to know that was how he wrote. Maybe like, for instance, if he's writing about the tour of the Hebrides that he's taking with Johnson, knowing that Johnson is going to be reading it and is almost a co-author, maybe that will be better behaved. But his own journals, are amazing, amazingly frank. He didn't pull any punches. Boswell had lots and lots of disappointments in his life. He disappointed himself almost every day, and lots of grotesqueries, physical grotesqueries. So we don't need to get into a whole lot of detail here, but they keep a man grounded. they really keep a man grounded. It didn't slow him down. Didn't slow down what we would euphemistically call his social life. But this book captures the genesis of a book in a wonderful way. The minute I saw this thing, I realized that when I got it, I realized I didn't have a copy at all, much less one that in a version I would like to keep. But then there's another thing that I pulled off the shelves that I have gone back to many, many times, that is also Boswell and Johnson related. This is, Frederick Pottle was the #1 Boswell scholar of his day, by far. And he wrote a long series of books, almost a cottage industry, on Boswell, parsing out his various diaries and personal writings and contextualizing them into different stages in Boswell's life. And the volumes can be really good. There's one called Boswell for the Defense that is really, really good. Pottle also did the definitive version of Boswell's London Journal, which is where Boswell is at his most blunt, at his most brutal. It's mesmerizing. I don't know why Boswell's London Journal is not as well known as, for instance, Samuel Pepys's diary. I don't know why that is. It's an unbelievably captivating book. And I found, for the snow, I'm going to try a little Boswell and see if maybe I get a cozy feeling. This is one of Pottle's volumes. This is Boswell, The Ominous Years, 1774 to 1776. And the years are ominous because Boswell at this period is starting to realize that he's starting to fail physically. First of all, that is a huge wake-up call for a lot of men, a certain kind of man. But in addition to that, he is starting to think that in addition to his body failing, one dramatic fall down a flight of stairs, but also other things that, trust me, are too gross to mention even in the 21st century. He was starting to think, not only is my body failing, maybe I, myself, am a failure. And he was his harshest critic. As often as people raked him over the coals for being dumb or ambitious or whatnot, he was a harsher critic on himself than anybody could dream of being. But even so, he kept going out of a sense of optimistic momentum, and it was around these years that he was starting to think, well, maybe that doesn't mean anything. You reach a certain point, a man of this type reaches a certain point and realizes, oh, wait, I'm going to die. Someday, maybe someday soon, I'm going to die. So what was all this? A little ironic thing for the author of Boswell's Life of Johnson to say, but Boswell didn't know that he was the author of Boswell's Life of Johnson. He thought he was just the author of a book. He didn't know he'd written an immortal classic. And the reason that I grabbed this book as opposed to any other in the section is because there's a lot of Johnson in here. There's the bulk of the meetings and conversations and adventures that Boswell had with Johnson that went on to form the raw material of Boswell's Life of Johnson are in these journals. They're in these accounts, and Pottle fleshes them out. So the team supreme is reunited here, and that's largely why I picked this, because I kind of want Boswell can be a little bit depressing to read on his own. I want Johnson to be making appearances here and there. These Pottle books are wonderful if you're interested in Boswell. I'll just say I recognize a mighty big if, nevertheless. And the last thing that I picked is Impractical. For a snowstorm or a sleet storm or any other kind of storm, it's just an impractical book. It's a coffee table book. I will find a way to thumb through this when the snow is falling tonight. I will find a way to do this. It's a gigantic survey. It's not meant to be read from cover to cover. I think when it initially came out, I did read it from cover to cover. It's huge. It weighs like 35 pounds. It's from the great folks at Rizzoli. This came out in 1989, but I didn't see it until, I think, 1990 or 91. And I believe I bought it for, you're not going to say, because it's a Rizzoli book, but this was expensive. I think this was like $30 to buy. It's this. It's, sorry. It's Venetian Palaces. And it is a gigantic, fully illustrated palazzo by palazzo look at the inside, the outside, the street and land entrances, the artwork. A lot of these palazzos have artwork that cannot be moved, so it's just painted on the walls. And also a little bit about its chain of custody, who originally built it, who were the famous people who lived in it, and who lives in it now, or did live in it now. And I love this sort of thing, and I actually have Venetian books, guidebooks that deal with this, but not with these kind of illustrations. That's the reason that you would get a thing like this, is because of the illustrations. That's the reason you would lose yourself in it. It wouldn't be because I have architectural guides to Venice that have all of this information, but they don't have any pictures at all. They have floor plans at most, whereas this has everything. It's really inconvenient. it's really inconvenient even to lift, let alone to consult. I am going to have to put a pillow across my lap and lay this on the pillow while sitting up and doing nothing else and just page through it. I'm going to have to do that. But it's a magnificent piece of work. So I think it's worth it to do. So anyway, there you go. It's just a random 30-minute chat about a random selection of books. That's all. I say because it's about to snow, but really I could do this at any time, and it could be about to be hay season. I would still want to do this. So there you go. I'm gonna wrap this up now. Probably you readers out there, you're all readers. You probably know it could very well end up being different books. These are what I'm thinking about now, but it could very well end up being different books when the snow actually starts flying. You never know. I don't actually, it's early enough in the day, so I don't actually know the full scale of all the books that will come today. It could be that I get something in the mail today that is a must read, that shoulders all these things aside. Not all of them. Not everything will be shouldered aside here. I'm pretty sure that I want to read this no matter what. But there you go. Some random books before it snows. I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.